It was a stormy autumn night when the guests gathered at Rosewood Manor for Sir Richard's annual charity dinner. The manor, an old Gothic building, stood like a dark sentinel against the rain. Inside, the chandelier glittered, the fire crackled, and the guests laughed, unaware of the shadow creeping upon them. Among them sat an elderly lady in a grey shawl, knitting calmly, her sharp eyes behind delicate glasses. This was Miss Marple, the village spinster with a mind like a steel trap. No one imagined that before the night was over, a murder would shatter the evening, and only she would be able to piece together the truth. Sound, glasses clinking, low chatter. Sir Richard raises his glass to friendship, to charity, and to truth. The chandelier flickers. Suddenly a scream. Darkness. When the lights return, Sir Richard lies dead over his wine glass, eyes wide open. Miss Marple quietly puts down her knitting and looks around the room. Chapter 1. The Guests and the Crime Scene. Inspector Graves was called at once. 5 people were in the dining room besides Miss Marple. They were now suspects. Visuals plus narration. Lady Margaret, Sir Richard's much younger wife, pale and trembling, clutching a silk handkerchief. James Porter, ambitious business partner, face glistening with sweat, hands shaking as he lights a cigarette. And Fletcher, investigative journalist supposedly covering the event, eyes darting nervously. Butler Collins, loyal servant of 30 years, hands clasped tightly, avoiding eye contact. Inspector Graves secures the room. No one allowed to leave. Miss Marple notices 3 things immediately. The faint smell of bitter almonds from the wine glass, a broken locket lying near Sir Richard's chair, a window slightly ajar despite the storm, but not a single footprint outside on the wet ground. Inspector Graves, dialogue: nobody leaves this room. This is now a crime scene. Lady Margaret, voice trembling, oh my God. Richard. James Porter mutters, this will ruin everything. And Fletcher pulls out her notebook but keeps glancing at the door. Butler Collins quietly stands by the fireplace, eyes lowered. Miss Marple, still silent, observes every detail. Chapter 2. The First Clues. Once the initial shock faded, Inspector Graves began questioning each guest while Miss Marple listened quietly. Lady Margaret, I left the table to answer a phone call from my sister. When I returned, Richard was like this. James Porter, I was in the library looking for a file when the lights went out. I never touched his drink. And Fletcher, I went to the restroom. When I came back, this had happened. Her shoes, however, were muddy, a curious detail Miss Marple filed away. Butler Collins, I was refilling glasses. Sir, I heard the scream but saw nothing. Miss Marple, walking slowly around the room, notices a sealed envelope poking out of the fireplace grate. Using her knitting needle, she pulls it free. Inside is a letter from Sir Richard to the Home Secretary, outlining his plan to expose a smuggling ring. Narrator. Suddenly, Miss Marple realized this was no random killing. Sir Richard had been silenced. She glances at Fletcher, whose pen trembles as she scribbles in her notebook. Chapter 3. Suspects under pressure. Inspector Graves decided it was time to turn up the heat. He took each suspect into the library one by one, hoping their stories would crack under pressure. Miss Marple, knitting in the corner, listened to every word. Lady Margaret's interview. Inspector, Lady Margaret, why did you leave the table? Lady Margaret, I told you, my sister called. It was urgent. Miss Marple notices the phone in the hallway is off the hook. No dial tone, no incoming call log. Narrator, she filed the inconsistency away like another stitch in her knitting. James Porter's interview. Inspector, Mr. Porter, you claim you were in the library. James Porter, yes. Looking for a file Sir Richard asked for earlier. Miss Marple's eyes drift to his cuff, a tiny smear of custard, unusual for a man who hadn't yet had dessert. And Fletcher's interview. Inspector, Miss Fletcher, those shoes of yours. And, defensive, I stepped outside for some air. This storm is suffocating. Narrator, but the garden was a swamp of mud. Only a desperate or careless person would venture out. Butler Collins's interview. Inspector, Collins, you were refilling glasses. Collins, Yes, sir. As always. Miss Marple notices his hands trembling and a green smudge on his sleeve, the same color as the dumbwaiter in the kitchen. Narrator. Piece by piece, the quiet old lady was building a tapestry of clues. Somewhere among these trembling statements lay the truth. Chapter 4. The trap is set. By midnight, the manor had turned into a cage of whispers. The storm raged outside, but inside, Miss Marple's mind was calm as a pond. She had collected enough threads. Now she needed to weave them into a net. Visuals plus narration. Miss Marple sits near the fireplace, knitting. Inspector Graves pacing, frustrated. The suspects huddled apart, exchanging wary glances. Dialogue. Miss Marple, softly. Inspector, I think it's time to offer our guests a little refreshment. May I make a suggestion? Inspector Graves, puzzled but trusting, nods. Servants bring coffee and biscuits. Miss Marple watches who takes what. Narrator. She asked that each guest hand over any personal belongings for safekeeping. The locket, the envelope, the cufflinks, all on the table like trophies. One object in particular glinted in the firelight, a tiny vial hidden in Aunt Fletcher's notebook. And Fletcher, snapping, "That's my medicine. I need it." Miss Marple, smiling faintly, "Indeed, bitter almonds. How curious for a digestive tonic." Narrator. In that instant, the journalist's mask slipped. Her pen fell from her trembling fingers. But Miss Marple wasn't done. She needed one final proof, the kind a murderer can't talk their way out of. She whispers to Inspector Graves, who leaves quietly. Chapter 5. The reveal. 15 tense minutes passed. The thunder shook the windows. Then Inspector Graves returned, with a drenched constable carrying a mud-streaked bag found hidden under the rear hedge of the manor. Constable. Found this where Miss Marple said to look. Sir, the ground's been washed clean by rain, but the bag's still warm. Inside, gloves with traces of cyanide. A second locket identical to the broken one, containing photographs of smugglers. A forged press badge with Aunt Fletcher's picture but another name. Narrator. The room fell silent. Miss Marple rose, setting her knitting aside at last. Miss Marple, calmly. Aunt Fletcher, or should I say Miss Aunt Felton, courier for the smuggling ring. Sir Richard threatened to expose you in tomorrow's paper. You slipped poison into his wine during the blackout. The window was your diversion, and those muddy shoes were your mistake. And, desperate, you can't prove. Miss Marple. Oh, but we can. The poison vial from your notebook matches the residue in Sir Richard's glass, and the letter you tried to burn connects you to his investigation. Narrator. The inspector snapped the handcuff shut. Anne's eyes blazed, then dimmed as the truth closed around her like the storm outside. Inspector Graves. I'll take it from here, Miss Marple. Miss Marple, quietly returning to her seat. And now, perhaps, we can all have some tea. Storms are so exhausting. Narrator. By dawn, the manor was calm again. Sir Richard's work would reach the Home Secretary after all. As the police cars drove away, Miss Marple watched from the doorway, her knitting bag over her arm. Another knot untangled. Another life saved from the shadows. Visual. Miss Marple walking into the misty morning, the camera lingering on her composed face, then fading to black with thunder rolling far away.